Hey y'all, I want to introduce you to Starting Block, the best co-working space in Madison. If you work from home or you are new to Madison, or you just feel like you don't have a professional community, you should definitely check out Starting Block. Many of you may know Starting Block as Madison's startup hub, but it's a lot more than that. They're constantly hosting networking and professional events for the community, and their co-working membership rates are super competitive. So if you're tired of working from home or you want to build your professional community, check out Starting Block at startingblockmadison.org. And that's startingblockmadison.org. Today on CityCast Madison. Do you have outside crawlers making their way into your house or apartment? Yeah, it's that time of year where it seems like just about every time you look up, little beetles are staring back at you from the corners of your rooms. The classics are, of course, the Asian lady beetles, brown stink bugs, and box elder bugs. So what's their deal? Why are they here, and what can we do about these invaders? PJ Leash, director of the UW-Madison Insect Diagnostic Lab, aka Wisconsin's official bug guy, knows a thing or two and has us covered. It's Monday, November 11th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Hi, PJ.
Hey, Bianca. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. And I understand you've had quite the bug year so far. How's it been going?
This time of the year, it's finally a little bit quieter for me. I mean, with my...
Like literally?
Yeah, more flexibility in my schedule and so on. But with my line of work, I essentially help people identify insects. And if it's, say, a pest one, I can kind of help with that too. But you know, if you think of the time of the year where insects are out, it's the warmer months. So if I were to plot, you know, how many questions I get per day, it's a bell curve centered right around the summer months. So I always appreciate when we get to the fall months and things kind of quiet down a bit for me. But this year was especially busy in the spring and early summer because we had the 17-year periodical cicadas out, which was such a cool experience. I am so glad I got to see and witness that for the first time with my own eyes. But the number of talk and media requests was through the roof. So it was a fun ride, but I'm glad I won't have to do that again for 17 more years.
Yeah. Yes, I've been seeing your name everywhere. And so, you know, I'm really excited to have you on CityCast Madison. And just for context, how did you become the literal Wisconsin bug guy? Yeah,
so my job here is I'm on the UW-Madison campus, and I run what's called the UW Insect Diagnostic Lab. So I help identify insects and related arthropods, so that's things like ticks and spiders and centipedes and millipedes and stuff like that. But also a big component of my job is providing outreach related to entomology, and also just serving as a general science communicator. And my predecessor, Phil Pelletieri, was in this role for a little over 35 years, and he had kind of informally picked up that title of Wisconsin bug guy. And so when I started a little over a decade ago, that came along, and it's stuck ever since.
It's been transferred. And yeah, can you share a little bit about what you do like day to day at the Insect Diagnostics Lab?
Sure. So the main thing I do is diagnostics. And again, that's simply helping identify insects for people. I see a lot of the same things again and again. It could be an insect in your home garden, or, hey, I found this in my kitchen. What is it? Is it good or bad? Do I need to worry? Do my kids need to worry? My pets, that sort of thing. And so it's identifying those things, but I feel a big chunk of it is also providing that context of what does it mean to find this in your house or in your yard. As I mentioned, I also do a lot of outreach. So every year giving dozens of lectures and webinars around the state just to teach people about insects, the importance of them, sometimes discuss pest ones as well. And then just serving as a general science communicator and kind of an ambassador for insects, if you will, because there's so many times where insects are viewed in a negative light. And if we were to look at huge list of all the insects out there, it's going to be a small percentage of them, probably 1 or 2%, something like that, that are truly pests. The rest of them are beneficial. They're helping us out one way or another. And so I really like to emphasize that and communicate that to folks.
Yeah, it does get lost in the ew bug.
Right. And I can understand if it's...
Not everyone has that reaction. And some, beetles, I'm like, ooh, cool, beetle,
Right. So I go through life, finding cool stuff all the time, but I can understand if, it's 4th of July, you're trying to have a campfire and the mosquitoes are just swarming you. Yeah, I can see how you're not happy about it at the time. But for every one pest, there's so many more that are doing good things in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and you talked about, insects and their related arthropods. I removed like 5 yellow sac spiders, and I only know what they are because I'm like, what is that? And they're all in the corners of my room. I saw you've been working with more scorpions than usual this year, too. Could that be because we're in Scorpio season? As a representative Scorpio.
This year has been weird. So I've been in my job a little over a decade, and in the all the other years I've been in the lab here, I've maybe seen 2-3 scorpion cases, and it was usually they were dead on arrival. It had come in a box of automotive parts from Central America or something like that, and it makes sense. It was a stowaway. You could see how it got transported here, but then this year, in Wisconsin, I've had 4 cases of live scorpions being spotted. The first one, it was amongst a shipment of bananas, so that makes sense. Okay, it hitched in there. But I've had a case from Prairie du Chien, and then I've had 2 cases from Madison where folks were sitting in their homes and saw something move out of the corner eye, found it, and it ended up being a scorpion. Now, based on the species, I could identify them as, these are not things that I think are starting to live in Wisconsin. I still think it's a matter of they are being transported up here with goods, or the most recent case I've got a live scorpion sitting in a tub about a foot from me right now.
Oh my God!
That's a species that came from California. That's the only place it occurs, is the far western coast of the U.S. In that particular situation, I was chatting with the family members. They had recently been in California, and so I don't know how it hitched a ride, but it must have somehow, because that's just a species that couldn't survive here. But yeah,
holy smokes.
4 live ones this year, and in 2 of those cases, people had been stung by them, which would, of course, be pretty scary.
Yeah. So that's strange. Thinking about seasons, I literally don't even know what to say, because I'm both fascinated and excited that scorpions are showing up here, but also they're dangerous too. So, but while we're talking about seasons, that's part of what we want to talk to you about, the ladybugs and the Asian lady beetles. Why are there so many ladybugs and their mimics around my house right now?
Yeah, so there's one species of lady beetle that's been really, really common in Madison area and many parts of Wisconsin about the last 3 or so weeks. They were abundant before that, but what happened is, and this was a little bit unusual this year, we've only had one solid hard frost. That was a couple weeks ago when folks had to bring their plants in and so on. But it's often in fall, we get that first hard frost, and that is a signal to these particular lady beetles. The multicolored Asian lady beetle is their full common name. But it basically tells them winter is coming, you better find some place to hunker down. Now, in their native range, this is a species that is native to places like China and parts of East Asia. They would be living in forested areas where maybe there's some rock bluffs or cliffs or outcrops. They'll fly to those cracks and crevices. They get down in there, and that's going to help insulate them. And from their point of view, they really want to hunker down for the winter and essentially hibernate. They only have so much energy stored up in their bodies. So they don't really want to be active all winter long. They want to hunker down, wait out the winter, leave in spring, go back to plants where they go about their business. But again, we get that first hard frost. That kind of tells them winter's coming. And especially we warmed up to some nice warm temps after that. That really gets them going. We had some temps, 70s, even 80s recently. That got them moving. I said visually they cue in on cracks, on like cliff faces. Well, if you're an insect and you look at a modern structure, there's a lot of horizontal lines and vertical lines from siding. So it's basically they're mistaking it for their natural habitat. They go to homes, they can, some contrasting colors can be involved too, but they'll go to homes, they sneak in, and they've basically been having this flurry of activity trying to find overwintering spots at the moment.
So this is interesting. I was by a city building, let's say that. It wasn't in Madison, but like an hour and a half north of here. And it seems like it would be the perfect sort of building with lots of crevices and even stone that would attract them. I was also wearing a bright yellow skirt and an orange cardigan, and everyone around me they weren't wearing anything like that, and they were flocking to me. Is there anything with color as well?
Yeah, there's definitely some component where colors, like contrasting colors, really seem to be able to attract them. I've had a number of times myself where I've been out in like early October, either wearing like a plain white t-shirt or a light colored shirt, and I've got relatively dark skin on my arms, and just like that contrasting color, they will fly to me, kind of crawl around. We aren't food for them. They feed on insects like aphids, but they will kind of nip you a little bit, which it's not going to break the skin, but it can really get your attention when they do that.
Yeah. And so, as you said, like it's in their name, they aren't native to here. Why are they here?
There's a long story, and the story with these actually goes back over 100 years to the early 1900s. And I just mentioned this a moment ago, but they're beneficial predators of small insects like aphids. And so there were actually a number of deliberate introductions over the last 100 plus years where folks said, hey, we've got a pest aphid. Let's introduce this predator. Maybe that will help bring the aphid pest populations down. And they never really seemed to catch on. So did they have an introduction and they just died out? That's possible. Or did they survive, but at just very, very low numbers? Regardless, back in about the 80s and 90s, they started popping up and spreading around the U.S. So we still don't know to this day, are they here from one of those deliberate introductions, or was it a separate accidental introduction? But for whatever reason, they must have hit that critical mass, and now they're established and widespread across the country.
So there's a little mystery there. And we always know, messing with ecosystems always works out exactly as planned. But I am curious, are these beetles harmful to Wisconsin's native ecosystem in any sense?
They can be. So if you were to look at the multicolored Asian lady beetle, which is so common and prevalent, they are in some regards physically larger than some of our other species. And so if you imagine a scenario like this, you have a plant in a farmer's field or your garden, you've got aphids on it, so that's drawing in and attracting lady beetles. If some of our native ones are smaller and basically getting elbowed out of the way by these larger ones, that can have some detrimental impacts on them. And so there has been some research looking at these non-native lady beetles, and there do seem to be some negative impacts on other lady beetle species. So there's that negative component of their presence. Context is so important, and I mentioned that earlier about providing context is a big part of my job, because they can do some bad things. They can displace and kind of outcompete some native lady beetles. They sneak into our homes and fall. We're not happy about that. If you were a farmer, though, for example, and you have these in, say, your soybean field, and they're helping control aphids to the point that you don't have to spray an insecticide or some other sort of pesticide, that can be a good thing. So there's certainly some trade-offs there, and they do seem to be pretty efficient predators. So again, it's not clear-cut good versus bad. It really depends on the
Right.
context in which you're talking about them.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So we've got these beetles and they're competing with lady beetles. Are lady beetles like as prevalent right now or,
Well, it would really depend on where you go looking for them. I mean, at the moment, we've got that multicolored Asian lady beetle, and that is like the species in our area that is really trying to get into structures in large numbers.
do those show up as red as well? Or is it like yellow and orange? Like if it's red, that's a ladybug.
Well, so that species, it actually has, the full common name is multicolored Asian lady beetle. Because if you do like a Google search, you can find kind of a composite image of all these different color forms or morphs of that species. Sometimes they are a dark orangish color with spots, without spots. Sometimes they're a light orange, no spots. Sometimes they can actually be black with orange spots. There's a ton of variability. And so if you didn't know this and you lined all these up, you would say, oh, that's a dozen different lady beetle species when it's all the same creature, just variation, how humans have different eye color, hair color, and so on. There are other lady beetle species out there, but for the most part, they're not particularly strongly attracted to buildings. So if you went looking in the spots where you'd expect to find those, you could bump into those as well.
Got it. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how to keep these guys out of our houses.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
His code name's Jackal. He's an exceptional assassin.
Streaming November 14th on Peacock.
He will kill again unless we stop him.
Academy Award winner Eddie Redmayne.
You're paying me to kill him. I am charging you for getting away.
The Jackal's here. Look at the exits.
BAFTA Award winner Lashana Lynch.
I will find him and I will kill him myself.
I like to win.
So do I.
The Day of the Jackal. Streaming November 14th only on Peacock.
All right, so let's say my house is just absolutely filled with these lady beetles or these multicolored orange lady beetles. It's more their house than mine. How do I get rid of them?
Yeah, that is a very common question I've been getting recently. And it's really helpful to understand, again, that their behavior. So they're coming from outside. They want to find a sheltered spot to overwinter, hunker down, and leave again in spring. That's what they'd ideally like to do. If they come in and they get into a warm enough spot and all of a sudden they're in your kitchen or living room or bedroom and they're active, there's certainly going to be a nuisance in that regard. Once we get to that point, we've really missed our key window of opportunity to keep them out. Keeping them out in the first place, that's the single best strategy in my mind. Once they get in, they are burning through their energy reserves. They don't have that much energy stored up, so they don't want to be active. Also, during the winter months, it's bone dry. And that's very, very hard on many insects. And so they're really active with some inhospitable conditions. And in my mind, unless you had just a gazillion of them inside, it doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind to spray them indoors with like an insecticide. All that's going to do is kill them. You still have to sweep or vacuum them up anyways. So what I tell folks is inside the house, what I generally suggest is to simply sweep them up with a broom or dustpan, things like that. Or if you have lots of them, especially around windows, maybe just leave your vacuum cleaner there with the hose attachment and suck them up. Again, we're not using pesticides to do that. You have to clean them up anyways, so why not just go right to the point with that? Back to preventing them from getting in, though. That is the overall key strategy, and there's 2 ways that this can be done. The first is kind of putsy and takes some time, but it's what we would refer to in the pest control industry as physical exclusion. And basically what that means is sealing things up snug enough that they can't get in the first place. So that could mean things like caulk or expanding insulation foam. Maybe you've got some bad weather stripping on doors and windows and replacing that, those sorts of efforts. And you have to focus on areas where there's maybe weak points in the armor, so to speak. So that's where the siding meets your foundation, where you have edges around doors and windows, where the siding meets the soffit area. There can be weak points there. But if you spend some time and you kind of tighten things up, that is going to help a lot with multicolored Asian lady beetles, with box elder bugs, and a whole bunch of other insects as well. Now, sometimes, and I know this is true in Madison, we have some old houses around, and you could spend hours and days and weeks trying to seal up all these nooks and crannies, and it's just impossible. You need 1,000 tubes of caulk or something like that. So in a case like that, what folks can do is spray a residual insecticide in those same kind of weak points I talked about, potential entry points. So that could be right where the siding meets the foundation. And we're not spraying the whole side of a house. You're only spraying a little strip around doors and windows. And what's nice about that, because I get this question, if I'm spraying, what are the risks for other insects? And with pesticides, if other insects simply aren't exposed to it, it's not going to affect them. And so if you look at the outside of your house and all you're doing is spraying a little strip around windows and doors, we're really not using a whole lot of product there. And what is typically done is a repellent type product. So if these insects contact it, might not kill them, but it just irritates them enough, they kind of go, whoa, what is this? And then they go elsewhere. So that can also be successful. But again, it boils down to preventing them from getting inside.
Keep them out in the first place. And then they're kind of just tired when they get in. I'm glad that you brought up the box elder bug, because certainly alongside these lady beetles are box elders, and also there's like ancient looking brown stink bugs. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of those. Is there anything you could share about their story and in that same sense, like what we can do to thwart them from coming in?
In terms of management, it's exactly the same. It's trying to prevent them from getting in by sealing things up or treating if necessary. In terms of the stories behind them, it depends on the species. So box elder bugs are native. They're associated with box elder trees, which are technically a type of maple, and they can also feed on a few other trees, other types of maples, maybe ash trees and things like that. One thing that really stands out to me about box elder bugs, though, is they thrive with hot or especially dry conditions. If it's rainy, they actually come down sick with a naturally occurring fungus, an entomopathogenic or insect-infecting fungus that'll cause their populations to stay low. And so if we went back, say, 5 or 10 years ago, I wasn't seeing too many box elder bugs. But if you think about our weather patterns in Wisconsin the last 2 to 3 years, we have bumped into some really pretty dry, drouthy stretches of weather, and that can help them out. So their numbers have kind of crept up a little bit the last couple of years. The brown marmorated stink bug, though, that also likes to get indoors, that's a non-native species. First showed up in the state back about 2010, and it does have a very strong presence here in the Madison area. So lots and lots of those around. Last year was perhaps a little bit quieter, but they seem to be having a really good year this year. I've had a lot of recent reports of that one.
Yeah. Every time I see them, I'm like, oh my God, it's a dinosaur. Miniature version. Do you have any stories of the craziest infestation situation you've witnessed or heard about in Madison?
That is really hard to pick out. So every year for the entomology department here, I tend to give an annual seminar just recapping what I've seen in the last year. And I kind of look back at my database of maybe 2,500 or so records and pick out some of my favorite stories, some of the big trends. And so it's always my opportunity to share some of the fun, kind of wacky X-Files type stories out there. And just this last year, because it had been my 10-year anniversary in the lab, I kind of pulled out my highlight reel and talked about some of these weird cases. I mean, it has been things like the scorpions. Years ago, I saw a huntsman spider. These are some of the largest spiders in the world, found in tropical, subtropical areas. I mean, leg span of, almost like
a big baseball.
Yeah, exactly. And one of those had showed up in Kenosha County in a shipment. I think it was a purse or handbag to a department store. I knew what it was right away. Very distinctive appearance. it was dead on arrival, but, perhaps a little bit scary in terms of how it looked. Some of the weirdest cases I get, though, are where I'm contacted by medical professionals for a consult. Essentially, there's insects where there shouldn't be insects. And so those are the weird, like, X-Files type cases that I don't see often, maybe once every 2-3 years, something like that. But very, very vivid memories when I do get those.
Well, PJ, I'm so excited to actually see you in person, and I hope that I never see you in person for any reason like that, because that is my absolute fear. Congratulations on hitting your 10 years, and thank you for coming on and giving us the word on fall beetles and also your scorpion adventures.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a blast. If you ever want to talk about insects again, feel free to reach out.
We will definitely hit you up. That's the PJ Leash, director of the UW-Madison Insect Diagnostic Lab, aka Wisconsin's bug guy. Also should note, we've got some news. Have you ever wanted to work on a podcast? Say, this podcast? We're hiring a producer. If you love Madison and you've got great story ideas about news and life in our hamlet, and you've got audio chops, you should really consider. See our show notes for a link to the job. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed this show, why not share this episode with someone dealing with some unwanted house guests? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, stay cozy.